Hey, it's episode number 10. Yes, we've made it there to 10 episodes. I am your host, Vito Chirco, alongside my new sidekick, my partner in crime now. That is John Macroon, the Doc from Doc and Jock. What's going on?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for downloading another episode. What can we talk about today? Any news of the Tigers?
Oh, man, right? Brad Ausmus, maybe, right? That's the leadoff topic for today's edition, episode number 10 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Co. And before we get into that, we have a guest coming on later in today's podcast, too. Dave Hogg of the AP and today's Knuckleball.com, formerly of FoxSportsDetroit.com. He should bring some great insight on Ausmus, on that situation. And now for you, Doc, your insight on the situation and what really went down. Why it happened. For me, it's because of the media, the rumblings and rumors being spread around, where it made Ausmus the fall guy, the scapegoat, and he was walking on eggshells, right? Figurative eggshells in the locker room, in the clubhouse. Wasn't a good thing for the Tigers and for their media relations, for their PR staff to deal with, and for Al Avila and not even his first full year on the job to deal with. So it was a bad note to start off his tenure as Tigers GM and executive vice president of baseball operations. I think he knew that, realized that, and said, I got to put an end to this. And it wasn't by putting Brad Ausmus out of his misery. It was by retaining him for a third and hopefully a final year in Motown. Doc, your thoughts on this?
Well, once the news broke that Brad Ausmus was going to be fired, Bernie Smilovitz came on the air and told everybody that he had a source that was talking to him, and he had to have at least checked it out with a couple others to put that on the air, right? So once that happened, we all thought, okay, this is something that's going to go down. Brad Ausmus handled it like a true professional. He didn't, he said, I will be here as long as they'll have me, and he handled it with the utmost professionalism. Now, when you scour the landscape, there really isn't a hot name manager right now to replace Brad Ausmus. So the organization looks at that and goes, okay, now Al Avila was instrumental in bringing in Brad Ausmus. He worked hand in hand with Dave Dombrowski. So in order for him to fire Brad Ausmus, that's kind of like saying, I basically made a mistake in my tenure here, working under Dave Dombrowski. So, but in my opinion, it's a bad move for the organization. And the timing was absolutely horrible. You announced that the day before the last home game, and you tell Brad Ausmus on the Friday. So why not just wait till the end of the year, like you said? Maybe in the last week something outrageous happens. Maybe there's something that you see in a further evaluation. Why make that decision that early? So in my opinion, I just don't like it. I wasn't ever confident that Brad Ausmus was going to be successful. And in his second year, I didn't see any steps forward in terms of his managerial in-game style. I didn't see anything that led me to believe that, hey, this is the next great manager. I just see an 81 guy. And it's very disappointing, and it kind of takes the luster off, next year. Maybe if they start off well, if they completely retool this team. But as of now, I'm sitting here as a sad Doc.
Well, you are, and the hopes aren't high now. I mean, for Tigers fans, for a large portion of them who think the manager has a large impact on the ball club, on the clubhouse, and factors largely into that.
Now, Vito,
right?
Why are people not happy? I mean, I know why. I've stated my opinions. Why do you think that everyone, besides the record, obviously, this was a team with a big payroll, and a lot of mistakes were made, but in your opinion, why is it that people may not be happy with the current manager of the Tigers, Brad Ausmus?
Bullpen mismanagement left and right, pitching staff mismanagement, pulling guys when he shouldn't, putting guys in when he shouldn't, and not even placing the right guys in certain situations right out of the pen. And for me, I think also people deservedly are mad of this decision made by Al Avila because of the fact that I think it's viewed as, and for me it's viewed as, a remedy for him not being axed mid-season after the All-Star break when Dave D didn't want to, but Mike Ilitch wanted him gone from the Tigers. But Dave D didn't want to pull that plug, right, on the Brad Ausmus experiment, which hasn't been a good one. So I think for me, it's more of Al Avila showing that he's in control, taking a step forward to say that I'm in charge here. And he wanted to get out in front of the media, wanted to show that the media has no say. I have the final call. I have the final say. And he proved that by retaining Ausmus for a third and hopefully a final year. And that's the positive part of this. If the Tigers underachieve, next year with moves that they make in the offseason, and they, as of right now, are expected to make these pitching staff moves for the rotation to upgrade the bullpen and big-time moves to upgrade the rotation and the pen. If that happens, where they make the necessary moves going into 2016, I think Ausmus has a short leash, which means if the Tigers struggle at all, I think he gets axed mid-season maybe. I think Al Avila will not go through this again and will make amends for not firing him at the midpoint or when he took over this year as the Tigers' head honcho. So for me, that's my take on that, Doc. What do you think?
Well, now the narrative that's kind of been talked about over the last week is it wasn't the failures of the 2015 season weren't all Brad Ausmus' fault. You had injuries. You had a bullpen that was put together by Dave Dombrowski that many managers really wouldn't succeed with. You had a situation where they felt like he handled the situation the best that he could. He kept a professional clubhouse. The players respect him. And so the narrative coming out is that it wasn't all Brad's fault.
And the players like it that he's being retained for next year. A lot of positive reactions. But who wouldn't be positive right now? They're players. It's part of that, you know how coaches have that coach speak? Well, players have to back up their manager too to keep their jobs for next year, or they're out of town, right? So it's the right thing to do by backing their manager, regardless if they really believe in him and if they really respect him with the utmost amount of respect. Because I don't believe they really have that utmost respect for him right now.
Yeah, see, part of me as an egomaniac really would love to have a microphone stuffed in my face. You know, I would be sarcastic. I would make it so that people wouldn't understand if I was being serious or not. So, Vito, you stick a microphone in my face and you're like, so what do you think about Brad being retained? I'd be like, oh, that kind of sucks. Well, I want to win. But no, exactly, you're right. The club, but in all seriousness, people are thinking that the inmates run the asylum. You had really a lack of leadership, and it was really evident in terms of, things that were happening in the clubhouse, the miscommunication with David Price. And then to top it off, and we're going to talk about it extensively later on in the podcast, Bruce Rondon gets sent home. I've never heard of that, for lack of effort. So that's something that is a knock on the manager.
Yeah, isn't that on him? Isn't that the blame on his shoulders for not getting him motivated to perform every day that he comes out of the pen in the 8th, 7th, or 9th inning?
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that on him? I would believe it's on the manager. But then I think he did the right thing by sending him home, by packing his bags. And I think by sending him home, that, I think, was an incentive for Avila to keep him. I think that was a good move by Brad Ausmus. It showed some power, some leadership out of Ausmus to make that move. That firm, putting his foot down and saying, Rondon, you get your act together or you're out of here. And he sent him home because of that.
Yeah, and Vito,
I like that.
But when it was talked about with the players, they had said this is a long-time issue. So in my opinion, I changed my view. This should have been nipped in the bud back in,
So they should have sent him home a long time ago. You're saying if this was the case.
Yeah, they were talking like players had gone up to him and had addressed this with him. Nick Castellanos had said that he kind of was in a tough spot, wondering if he should go up to Bruce Rondon and say something, being that he's only, still under 5 years experience. And so this was not something that just popped up. This is something that's been talked about in the clubhouse. So if this is going on, I think Ausmus waited way too long.
He mishandled it. Once again, another mishandling of something inside the clubhouse. And as a manager, you're the leader of the clubhouse. You should be handling that, that in-clubhouse matter right away and nip it in the butt, like you said. He didn't do it a long time ago. And then young players like that thought that all along, or at least for a long time now, this season. Nick Castellanos, example A, and he was on 105.1 talking about it. And he defended Ausmus and Rondon being sent home. But Castellanos, I think, would have taken the leadership way before Ausmus, which I think shows something about the lack of leadership by Ausmus at the same time. So it's a good move, but also there's a bad part of it. And the bad aspect or side of it is that he didn't handle it a long time ago when he could have, because it was a long-term thing that was happening with Rondon, not showing that energy level and just being out of shape and lazy. And you have to, as a manager, nip that in the butt. But at least he did do it. Once again, to play the devil's advocate, which I'm playing, I guess, with you here, at least he did do it at some point before the season was over.
And now, Vito, it just doesn't make any sense in terms of the decision-making that new general manager Al Avila did. Let's say, for example, a manager has some issues out, that's in a playoff race. Maybe the Toronto manager has issues. Maybe a certain situation happens where Ned Yost gets totally, something happens in the playoffs and he falls out of favor. You do yourself a disservice by basically putting your cards on the table and saying, hey, this is what we're doing. I think the Tigers organization, after this season, owed the organization a thorough search.
To reevaluate everything, right? And they should have with Ausmus.
Yeah, and you don't have to make it public. You don't have to say, yeah, we're looking for a new manager, we're looking for a new bench coach. We don't have to say that. You can just do it, look around, get the landscape. Who are the hot young faces? Who's out there? Maybe a guy that if Brad Ausmus is gone, who's on the radar? And then you announce not only that Brad Ausmus is coming back, his entire staff is going to be free to come back. No punishment, right? No repercussions for the lack of success this year, which is based primarily on Dave D and his shoulders because of the lack of moves to upgrade the bullpen and the rotation and the depth of the team as a whole. Because the lineup's not the greatest either. So it really falls on Dave D,
primary responsibility of getting this ball club into contention, but Brad Ausmus did not help out whatsoever. And I thought he lost out in the process, and he didn't. He gets retained for doing nothing really of good, quality, or worth with the Tigers in 2015. For me, I didn't like the decision, like we said, but I think they also looked at it this way, as you brought up earlier in the podcast. Ron Gardenhire, is he that much better? He's a retread, past his prime, over the hill, whatever you want to call it. I think they viewed him as that, and if he was a guy they were negotiating with, and he was a best-case scenario for them to hire to replace Ausmus, I think they saw the writing on the wall that this guy is not sabermetrically oriented. And Alavila is, but Ron Gardenhire is stuck in his old ways. He doesn't want to install or implement shifts, defensive shifts on the infield. And I think he wanted a guy that will do that, and at least Ausmus will do that. So I guess maybe they're not upgrading here because they're keeping him, but they're not downgrading, I guess. I mean, that's simple to say. They're not upgrading or downgrading. And maybe by getting a guy like Gardenhire, they wouldn't have upgraded that much anyways. So why not just keep the guy for another year? And like I said, Doc, if they make the necessary upgrades and moves, guess what? Ausmus will have a short leash next year. They will not mess around. He will be gone after year 3 for sure, if not before the end of year 3. If they really struggle big time out of the gate, or if their struggles persist like they have in 2015, Ausmus, this is my guarantee for you and everybody listening to this. He will be gone. I'm going to say if they struggle in the first half big time, he'll be gone by mid-season. They will not mess around with Ausmus once again.
Well, at least there is a general consensus that the Tigers are going to retool. They're going to have to address the bullpen the best way they can. They're going to have to bring in some starters. They're going to have to retool that pitching staff and bring in a couple more consistent hitters. And I do believe that the Ilitch organization is not just going to kowtow and just stop spending money, but I think that they're going to look for a little bit more cost-effective players, but guys that have to produce. I mean, you can't go out there and experiment with guys like Alfredo Simon. You can't go out there and pay guys like Anibal Sanchez $16 million and then have him be in and out of the rotation. That injury to Anibal Sanchez is concerning. Whenever you have a situation when it's a shoulder issue, all those innings that he's pitched, you're concerned. And I know JV has, apparently come back according to what everyone's seeing and things like that. But you never know. Another year on his arm, you never know. You don't think he's going to come back, and there's no guarantee he's going to come back and be the JV of old and get you 16 wins. He's going to be consistent, but I think he's going to be more up and down. I really feel like he's like a 10-10 pitcher as we speak.
And he might be in and out of the rotation going forward in his career, too, because he's older and older, the wear and tear on his arm. And the thing is, he's played really good in the second half. But that's one good half of baseball, not a full season of effective baseball every fifth day. Then Anibal, can he stay healthy and perform effectively every fifth day? Can he be that number 2, number 3? And he's making 16 mil, okay, right? 16 mil, I believe, as you said. Now, are they going to pay somebody else that much to fill a void at the number 2 spot behind JV in the rotation for 2016 and going forward? Getting a guy like Johnny Cueto, they have to pay him 16 mil at least, if not north of 20 mil. So would you start off with that big of a price tag for Johnny Cueto to come here? We talked about it last week. I said he wasn't worth it, but he might be the best arm out there that you can get because of the foreign baseball player influence inside the clubhouse for the Tigers. And because David Price isn't coming back here. He didn't like the experience in Motown. He's the best arm out there, the most dominant, effective guy every fifth day. So for me, I want him, but he's not coming back here. So really you have to fall back on Johnny Cueto as that next best arm that you can use or sign to use as a number 2 next year behind JV in the rotation. And he'd be a great number 2. He's a borderline ace, but he's a very high-end number 2. That's where you want him slotted in the rotation. So for me, I would like that to a certain extent if you bring down the price for him. Thing is, I don't see him, going for a lower price to sign with the Tigers. He's going to go for the money like everybody is nowadays, Doc.
Now, Vito, I just peeked at your site there, freep.com, and I Googled Detroit Tigers 2016 schedule. Look how this opens up next year. It could be bad quick. 2 on the road to open the season, April 5th and 6th at Miami.
Interleague, you had to start off. How about that?
You better win those 2 because then you start a 3-game homestand versus the Yankees. Then you play 4 with Pittsburgh, 2 at home, 2 on the road. Then a series on the road at Houston, then 3 at Kansas City, then home for 3 versus Cleveland. Then another series going forward versus Oakland, 4-game set. So right away, you're going to play some tough teams, KC, Pittsburgh, and Houston.
But you can't worry about 2016 yet, right?
I'm worried.
Not in terms of that, in that way where you look at the schedule and say they're going to lose or win this series or that series. Because these teams could all change, remember. The A's were great in 2014. This year, miserable because they traded off everybody. But that's in Billy Beane style, right? These other teams don't make those kind of bold moves right off the bat or at any point. Where he did right just to start off the offseason, he said, I'm trading everybody. He didn't care. He cleaned out everything, right? He really did there in Oakland. The Tigers, though, I see them upgrading, like we said. I don't see them just standing pat. It's a retooling, not a rebuild, but a reboot, as they termed it before, with Dave D. And if Al Avila follows in that method down that route, they're going to get the guys that they need, I think, to upgrade that rotation and the pen. And I think they're going to spend more money than I think we have thought in the past than we thought when they didn't really spend any money this past offseason. Because Illich is around. He seems more healthy, more lively. He's been around the ball club. I think he's more intrigued, more intertwined with the ball club right now, and it's everyday operations. And with that being said, I think he'll spend the big money because he wants to win while he's still around. And he's still around, and it seems like he's more lively and vibrant, Doc, than in the past.
Right now, I guess the simple question to ask is, would you buy or sell on these Detroit Tigers as we speak? Knowing that they got the same manager, knowing that it's going to take time to put this together. Are you buying on them? Are you staying on this bandwagon? You think they're going to be a team that could return to the playoffs quickly? A lot of people are saying, look out, this could be a team that falls off and doesn't make the playoffs for the next couple seasons.
Well, you know what? I'm always with the Tigers. I'm not on the bandwagon.
Vito buys.
I'm always with them, always loyal, and I buy, but not as much as I did before the news of Brad Ausmus being retained.
You're buying.
It's not all about Brad Ausmus, remember.
Yeah, you're buying, but you're haggling on the price.
Yeah, not as much. I'm not going to buy as highly as I would have before. But I'm not selling by any chance because I'm a lifelong Tigers fan. I'm a hardcore guy through thick and thin. I'm no bandwagoner, so I'm never jumping off anything because there's no bandwagon for me, Doc. And remember that. You're on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Co. We talked a little bit, Doc, about Cueto last week. How about some other pitchers that they could target? Jeff Samardzija, who looked brilliant a week ago for the White Sox against the Tigers in that doubleheader. Maybe a cheaper, a lower-end guy like a Doug Fister to fill out the back end of the rotation, who has really bad numbers, so I don't really want the Tigers to go target him. But he would be a cheap option. If they're going really cheap, they go after him. He's a fourth, fifth starter, though. Could they maybe get that top of the line, top of the rotation guy instead as a Cueto, as a Jeff Samardzija, and then just fill up the rest of the rotation, Doc, possibly, with youngsters. Daniel Norris, Sanchez, a veteran. And then you have Michael Fulmer, who came over from the Mets, remember, top prospect, great in the minors this year. He could be that fifth starter next year instead of going out and signing a past his prime Doug Fister. For me, that's how I would fill out the rotation in 2016, Doc. What do you think about that possibility?
Yeah, money aside, let's just say who is the best free agent pitcher out there that we could get. Because I do believe Al Avila is going to make a splash. I don't believe he's just going to sit back. He's seen the wheeling and dealing. He's seen how when we all thought that we couldn't get Prince Fielder, Dave Dombrowski wheeled and dealed it and made the move. I think it's incumbent that we get the best guy available that can help the Tigers in the starting rotation. Yes, money's going to play a factor, and I don't think that he's going to have an unlimited checkbook to just go out and get one or two guys. So he's going to have to pick the best one. And we'll talk more realistically about who we can get. But just right now, who's the best guy out there that if we brought him in, irregardless of the price, would help us and get wins?
Hands down, David Price. But we already had him. He's not coming back here. That's the thing that's sad because if they want to make a splash, they would go after him and make that splash by signing David Price. But now it's Johnny Cueto. And I don't trust his arm, elbow issues, all that kind of crap. And is he really that dominant ace? He's not a bona fide ace. He's a lower-end ace, really a great number two. But if JV's that ace next year, then you have a great number two in Cueto. That's why I'm willing to sign him. Trust me, even after what I said last week, I'll back off of that statement a little bit, where I said he's not worth it at all, pretty much. He's worth it to a certain extent. But then you have to realize or factor in how much am I willing to go to pay him to bring him here to Motown. If you're Al Avila, how much are you willing to pay? Is there a certain price tag you're not willing to go past? I think Illich will just say, you make that splash, you spend whatever you want on Johnny Cueto. Because, he can make that instant impact as that number two. For me as a baseball man, wouldn't pay Johnny Cueto anything close to $20 million. And I guess anything close to that would be 17 or maybe 18 or 19, because I guess you might pay him 16, maybe 17. But that's a lot of money in itself for any starting pitcher out there, let alone a guy like Cueto who's been banged up in the past too, and never has gotten it done in the playoffs, and has been really miserable in the second half in a pennant race for the Royals. So for me, that makes me back off a little bit on how good Johnny Cueto is as a starting pitcher, Doc.
Gotcha. So then realistically, knowing the market, knowing what the Tigers might be willing to pay, you think we should probably go for a lower tier like a Samardzija or a Zimmerman or a Doug Fister type. That's the best option in terms of slotting him into the payroll, making sure that we're not committing too much money because you got a lot of money spent on guys that are already here with the Tigers.
I like Samardzija, but he's more like a number three. And really more of a proven, low-end number three. Because at times he's very inconsistent. He has dominant number two, number one stuff. But then every fifth day he's not bringing that kind of stuff and effectiveness. So for me, he's more of a number three who can get it done. But then he He might be a lower end number 3 on a bad day.
So what do you think about Jordan
So
Zimmerman?
it's hard to.
What do you think about
consider
Zimmerman?
him.
He's a guy that's been talked about. I know that Scherzer's been the guy there, but Zimmerman's kind of, I think, held his own.
He has, and he's better than Jeff Samardzija, but I think Samardzija is more that, like I said, that pure dominant stuff. I'm just intrigued by him, I think, because of him being a Midwestern guy, went to South Bend, played for Notre Dame baseball and football. I'm thinking he might be willing to come here because of that, and because he hasn't had a great year, you might be willing to sign him for a cheaper contract. And Zimmerman's younger, though, too, and I still believe under 30. Samardzija's right there as well, around the same age. So for me, when you factor in the age, there's not a big difference, but Zimmerman's been the more effective ace-like guy at the front of the Nationals rotation. And last year was really good, Cy Young-esque. For me, he's not going to be that if you sign him to a long-term contract going forward. I mean, nobody really is over 5, 6, 7 years consistently. But I would say if you get him for 4 or 5 years and expect him to be a number 2, a great number 3, Zimmerman can definitely be that. Samardzija, I have my concerns about him being that. That's why I would like, if the Tigers sign him, to sign him for a cheaper contract. But then, once again, these guys are represented by all these big-name agents. They're looking for the big money contracts. And the Tigers shouldn't pay Samardzija that. They should consider paying Zimmerman that. But then there's a price tag issue once again. How much are you willing to pay him after already paying JV and Sanchez? What do you think? How much would you pay Zimmerman, Doc? Because once again, I have that problem with paying these guys who I know aren't dominant guys. They're good guys, and you know they'll upgrade your rotation big time for the Tigers from where they've come from, this year with Buck Farmer, the likes of him, and Kyle Ryan and Lobstein.
Well, you're going to have to potentially outbid some teams because when a starting pitcher goes on the market, that's what teams look for. So if you can kind of maybe tell me what his current salary is, I think he could slot in there between 13 and 15 million. I know that Anibal Sanchez is commanding 16. I think his contract is 80 million total. But, if you can get him around that 12 to 14 range, that's a great number. That's not a bad number to slot him in at. But I like the fact that if you're now talking about how this rotation could shake out, it is really incumbent on how Anibal Sanchez is going to do. JV can be the one. If Anibal can be the solid guy and come back and regroup, I mean, he gave up a lot of home runs, did Anibal Sanchez.
29 home runs, American League.
Yeah.
Tops. I mean, that's not good, Doc.
Yeah, so the question, he's got a big, huge question mark. So if he's the number 2, maybe then you slot in a Zimmerman or a Samardzija or the guy that you bring in. And then you got Daniel Norris. I do think he's done enough to at least get a spot in spring training to be a starter on this team as a 4. He'd be a good solid 4 to get experience and not have all that pressure on him going up against the ace of the other team. So he's a solid 4, and then, maybe you get another free agent to fill out the 5, or one of these guys might step up.
Fulmer, right? How about him as a 5th starter? Instead of paying money.
A little early. I think he jumped now. He a good season at AAA. Show it a little bit over time. Don't rush him up here. He's a guy that, by all accounts, is going to be a decent pitcher. He's a guy that everyone likes. Maybe Boyd can step up. He hasn't been horrible, but again, towards the end of the season, he got rocked quite a bit. So looks like he needs more seasoning in the minors. But maybe you fill it out with 2 free agents. I
think the best case scenario is that you sign Johnny Cueto, and then you slot him in as a number 2 behind JV. If JV's that good number 1 guy next year, you have him as a number 1, Cueto's a number 2. That's a great 1 and 2. And then I think Norris already has solidified his status almost as the number 3. Almost has already solidified his status as that. That's the key phrase. As at number 3 ahead of Anibal Sanchez, who's been so iffy with the home run ball and the injury proneness. I think he's more than number 4 at $16 million a year right now for the Tigers. He's been so good in the past, but this year I think he's really shown his true colors of being an older pitcher now, a guy that really can't recover as quickly from injuries. I see him as more of a number 4, but a good number 4 at that. Doc.
Well, look at me, Vito. I'm trying to undercut Jordan Zimmerman, who's already making this season 16.5.
Yeah, you really undercut him then, huh? I just looked him up too, and his baseball reference stats right here. 3.68 ERA. That's good. But then you look at his FIP, fielding independent pitching, which is more important to me. It's almost 4. So I wouldn't want to pay him a ton either. But then you look at Cueto, like I said, Cueto's been horrible in the second half. And he's your top free agent option there for starting arms, right? And you want to get a starting arm. So maybe the better route is trading for a guy, Doc, honestly, at this point. So you can't get the best guy out there in David Price. He's not coming back here like we already explained and, established here. Cueto's the next best thing. I have a hard time, like I said already, not to kill a dead horse here or beat a dead horse, but I think you do as well, right? Paying that much money. And then we look at Zimmerman now. We thought, maybe he'll come here for, let's say, 15 mil. He's not going to come here for 15 mil now, Doc. He wants 18 to 20 mil probably. And he probably deserves it. On this current market, he's going to get that money from somebody.
Yeah, I look forward to having more chats with you regarding how this lineup needs to be adjusted. But to sum up, we both don't think that Brad Ausmus should have been brought back. It's going to take a major retool, a major reboot, as you would say, to get this team back where they need to be, because Kansas City, they don't look like they're going too far away. Minnesota, if Torrey Hunter's back with them, they look like an up-and-coming team.
They're young, yeah.
We all laughed at them, but look who's just 1 or 2 games out of the wild card spot. So, and then that's something to talk about, too, is that a lot of people were talking about the lack of leadership, and maybe Torrey Hunter should be brought back. And I'll ask you that after the break.
Okay,
I'll ask you that after our interview, because we got Dave Hogg coming up next on the Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company podcast.
Yes, we do, from the AP and today's knuckleball.com. That is Mr. Dave Hogg, who is joining us just after this break here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Co.
Thanks, everyone who's been downloading our weekly podcast on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. To support us, all you got to do is go visit our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. It's the hub of our operation. It's where you can go to download all the podcasts. It's where you can go to find out about all the news and happenings on the podcast network. We're running 4 to 5 weekly podcasts. Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company every Wednesday. Motor City Sports Rant comes out every Tuesday. Doc and Jock every Thursday, still going strong. And we got a new podcast, the Fantasy Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, that comes out each and every Friday, breaking down all the news and notes in fantasy football. So go support us, help keep this operation going. We got a nice office here, and we greatly appreciate all the support. Those of you who have been clicking through the Amazon banner, thank you for all your support. We greatly appreciate it. Everyone here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network loves all the support, and we want to keep growing. DetroitSportsPodcast.com. And now back to Vito and the Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company podcast.
So now joining me on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company is Mr. Dave Hogg from the AP and today's knuckleball.com. Dave, what's going on today?
Pretty quiet.
It is over there, huh? And you know what? We're having a lively discussion here about Brad Ausmus and dissecting the reasons why the heck he was brought back for a 3rd season. For me, I couldn't understand it on Saturday when it was announced. How about you? Were you turning over tables and flipping out, or were you more calm, cool, and collective, Dave, regarding the news?
I don't think I was turning over tables. I was surprised. I didn't think he'd be coming back. It seems to have come down to an argument between the front office wanting Brad back and the Ilitch family wanting somebody more experienced. The name that kept coming up was Ron Gardenhire. I think Al Avila feels that he can work with Brad, get Brad more comfortable with using advanced statistics, which is something he likes to use, was not something Dave Dombrowski was big on. It's not something Brad right now is big on, as opposed to somebody like Gardy, who is significantly older, more experienced, more set in his ways. Now, I don't understand why it became Ausmus or Gardenhire like they were the only 2 choices. I think it would have made more sense to go, look for a 3rd option, somebody who was already a big numbers guy, if that's what you wanted. I don't think Brad's the whole reason they had a bad season. I don't think he's most of the reason they had a bad season. I think it was the injuries and the bullpen imploding and starting rotation having a bad year. But I don't think he's done a great job either.
Now, would you have brought him back, though, for a 3rd season, the 3rd and final year of his contract with the Tigers?
Personally, no, I wouldn't have. And like I said, I was surprised they did. I don't think he's a great in-game manager. I think he struggles with working the bullpen. And he's a little too old school for my case with you got to be a proven veteran closer to pitch the 9th inning, and it takes a special kind of pitcher to pitch the 9th inning. I'm not a big believer in using your bullpen that way, but the save stat has turned that into, some guys are special because they can do it. I mean, that's why he's using Neftali Feliz right now as his closer.
And Dave, let me ask you this now. Do you think this move really comes down to the fact that Al Avila wanted to take charge and show that he is the man that's calling the shots now for the Tigers, and wanted to, at the same time, get in or out in front of the media to tell the media that, you know what, you're not important. What you say about Brad Ausmus being fired means nothing because I'm making, like I said, the final call here. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that did have something to do with it. I think when it came, I believe that the leaks were not from the front office. I believe they were from the Ilitch camp, and I think Al wanted to prove to everybody, not just the media. I think he wanted to make it clear within the organization that he is making these calls. It's not going to be, his ownership overrules it, fine, but he wanted to prove that he's going to be the one making those decisions. And Brad was his choice, and Brad was coming back.
Now, will Avila and the Tigers ultimately regret this, in your opinion, Dave?
I don't think they'll regret it. I don't think it's a great move, but I don't think it's a horrible move. The big thing for next year is going to be the job that Avila does rebuilding the roster. I mean, if you give Brad, he showed this last year, if you give Brad a good roster, he can win with it. I mean, they got swept in the playoffs, but he got them to the division champions. Over a Royals team, at the time, everybody's like, well, they only beat the Royals by one game. In hindsight, beating the Royals by one game last year looks a lot better. I don't think they'll regret it too much. I don't think maybe he costs you a game or two, but the players like him. He has done good things with young guys. I mean, JD Martinez came to the Tigers as a quadruple A player with no future, and he's now an all-star. Jose Iglesias came back from the injury, and now he's been an all-star. I don't think they'll regret it. I don't think it's a move that jumps them up in the standings. I think he'll do a decent job with whatever roster he's given.
And it's about the roster that he's being handed. And for the Tigers, they have to upgrade big time, pitching staff-wise, bullpen, and starting rotation. And let's focus on how they will upgrade now that starting rotation. What pitchers do you have in mind, Dave, that the Tigers could target in the offseason to upgrade the top of that rotation and really 1 through 5 as a whole?
That's going to be real. I think that's the biggest question in the offseason is what they're going to target. I mean, they could go after somebody like a Johnny Cueto, and he got off to a bad start in Kansas City, but his last few starts he's been better. If you put cueto in a rotation, Verlander and a healthy Anibal Sanchez and Daniel Norris, who I'm really high on, I think that's the start of a really good rotation. Now, if, I don't know what Illich and Avila have talked about as a budget, and the other question is, of course, what are the Dodgers going to do? I mean, the Tigers can't compete on a financial basis with the Dodgers. If the Dodgers decide they want Johnny Cueto, they're going to get him.
Now, Dave, is Cueto worth potentially a $20 million price tag? For me, I have trouble thinking that he is. I don't believe it.
Not at 20, no. I wouldn't go that high, and that's the thing. If the Dodgers are willing to go that high, then you're going to have to give them. Other than that, I think what you may end up seeing is them going – I would not be at all surprised to see Doug Fister come back.
So that would be a cheap option. Now, how about some other cheaper options? Maybe even a Jeff Samardzija who has some high-end potential but doesn't always realize that full upside that he has as this guy that could be a dominant starter every fifth day but just isn't.
Yeah, I mean, those are the guys that they're probably going to have to gamble on, is guys who have potential upside but aren't consistent and hope you can get something out of them. I mean, the other guys who you're going to have to look at is a lot depends on the kids they got in the trades. I mean, Norris looks like he's ready. There are times that Boyd looks like he could pitch. I would rather see him starting Toledo as your sixth starter, but he has shown flashes. Michael Fulmer was fantastic in Double-A. They didn't bring him up because he hit his innings limit, but he was fantastic, both in the Mets organization and in the Tigers organization. So he's a guy that you're going to look at probably at some point next year. And then, a Samardzija or a Fister who, you know what you're going to get with Fister as long as he's healthy. But I think the big key is going to be Anibal Sanchez's health. If he recovers and gets back to where he was, even close to where he was the last couple of years before this one, then he's an easy number 2 starter. This year was just a disaster, but I don't know, and I'm not sure anybody knows exactly how much the shoulder was bothering him all season.
So do you think he'll be able to return to form then in 2016? Anibal Sanchez, that is?
I think there's a chance. I don't know how good a chance because I haven't seen, I don't know. Like I said, nobody has said publicly how long his shoulder was bothering him, and if that was the reason he suddenly went from being the toughest starter in Major League Baseball to hit a home run against the easiest in one season. I mean, something obviously went significantly wrong for him to go from giving up 4 or 5 home runs a year to giving up 29.
Yeah, something big time. And then let's look at now, you brought up Norris, Fulmer. How good do you think they'll be going forward as Tigers rotation arms?
I really like Norris from what I've seen, and I know that his teammates are really happy with him. They said there's been a couple guys, James McCann for one, who have said a lot of prospects when they had the oblique injury in September would have just shut it down. Norris worked his butt off to get back in so that he could make some starts by the end of the season. Constantly talking to Verlander, he's constantly talking to Sanchez, getting tips from the veterans, and that's really impressed guys. How hard he's working physically, but how hard he's working to pick stuff up from the veterans. So I'm really impressed by him. I haven't seen Fulmer, but his stats in Double-A are fantastic. Now, he hasn't pitched above Double-A, and that's a big step for a lot of guys. So we'll have to see on him. And Boyd has shown signs. I mean, he's had some games where he's come out and looked really good. He's had games where he's come out and looked really off. But I still think they're all above any of the homegrown Tiger pitching press.
Yeah, so no love for Buck Farmer or Kyle Lobstein or Kyle Ryan, huh, Dave?
No.
Yeah, and I don't blame you, Dave, on that front. Do not at all. Do not. And you were talking about Daniel Norris being this hard worker, and then to reverse the course here, Bruce Rondon is not. He was sent packing, sent home because of a lack of energy. What do you think about him and the possibility of him returning to good form next year and to being a Tiger? Will he be a Tiger in 2016?
I think that's entirely up to Bruce Rondon. I think if he shows up for spring training and he's in good shape and he works hard, I think they'll take him back. They will, and I think his teammates will accept him. I mean, we've talked to players about it. They're all saying he needs to get his act together, and they think this was a good move because maybe this will be the thing that will get him to realize that throwing a 100-mile-an-hour fastball isn't enough. He has always believed, because he's had this great arm, that he can just come out, show up on the mound, throw 100 miles an hour, and be a star. And it doesn't work that way. But it can go one of two ways here. He either shows up in camp next year, fired up, ready to really commit to it, or he pouts. And if he pouts and doesn't take this seriously and doesn't learn a lesson from it, then no, I don't think he'll ever see him pitch for the Tigers.
Do you have any hope that he can be a closer again, really quick, Dave?
He's got the ability, yeah. If he takes it seriously with his fastball and his slider, if he's willing to work at it, he could be a closer, because his slider has turned into a really good second pitch. And when you're throwing 102 and then you can throw an 89-mile-an-hour slider, you can be really tough.
Yeah, anybody that can do that, can hurl that well, it has something in them. But it's about the energy now, the energy level, the work ethic. Will he improve with that? Well, we'll find out next year, Dave. And with that, Dave Hogg of the AP and today's Knuckleball.com, thank you very much for all your time on today's edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco & Co.
Thanks for having me.
All right, have a good one, and we'll talk to you again soon. And back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco & Co. after that fun, interesting, insightful segment with Dave Hogg of the AP and today's Knuckleball.com. You got to check him out on Twitter as well at Star Eagle. I'm on Twitter at Vito Jerome. You know, Doc, you have your own Twitter handle, but you don't really go on there, right? You're just on the at Detroit Podcast one, which you're busy with constantly. Do you even get any sleep ever? With your work inside the office, and then you do that too all the time.
You know, I love it bantering with the fans. I actually have multiple Twitter accounts. I have the one for the psychology office. I have my own personal one. I used to tweet more on that one, then I made it more private. And now, yeah, like I said, we built a strong following on our main page at Detroit Podcast, so that's where I spend most of my time, bantering with the fans and having a good old time.
And you're always having fun, and we're having fun today on the 10th episode. Episode number 10 we've made it to, Doc. We have here on Tigers Talk with Chirco & Co. The first 4 or 5 with Dominic Chirco, and the last 5 or so with you then, here on Tigers Talk. And we talked about really everything that I wanted to with Dave Hogg there. We talked about the reasons why Brad Ausmus wasn't fired, why he probably should have been. We talked about that as well, in-game management issues, and he brought that up. He doesn't think he's a very good, this strategy guy in games. And I think that's true. I think a lot of people think that, and you've brought that up in the past, too, about Brad Ausmus, Doc.
Nobody thinks that. Anyone that's watched the Tigers has seen it. So I agree with everything that Dave said. He had a lot of strong takes, and, the big thing is, how will Bruce Rondon handle this adversity? How does the clubhouse receive him? And, Ian Kinsler had come out and said that, we all make mistakes. He might be a new person coming back in the spring, but I don't know. I'm not a guy that likes managers to be laid back. Like right now, we got a coach in the Pistons who's fiery, who's honest, who'll say, it was on me. We didn't play well.
You like that off the cuff.
I like Stan Van Gundy way more than guys like Jim Caldwell, guys like Brad Ausmus. Those guys are just way too PC,
calm and boring, right?
Calm and
they don't
boring.
ever get fired up.
And it's not calm and boring. It's PC. Like they give you the canned answers. It's like they go right to the book, and it's like, yeah, we just have to execute better with the Lions and with guys like Brad Ausmus. No, it's just baseball. We just have to, keep at it. It's a long season. All those cliches that don't tell you anything about the organization. You don't have to come out and be like, I think Nick Castellanos has been way underachieving, but you got to present it in a way that at least gives us a little bit of insight into what's going on. With his press conferences, they just turned me off. Like, in general, he was glib. He presented himself as like a guy that was too smart for the room. Brad Ausmus, your team was underachieving. You can be a little bit more honest with us. We're not going to dissect it that bad, but to go to canned PC answers and stuff that's uninteresting and to act like we don't know what's going on. I mean, we're all watching the same game. We're all watching the fact that you make decisions that don't lead to positive things. And then when we question you, you start doing it the next game. You don't believe in 4-out saves. Then why did Soria get a 4-out save the very next day? Is that coincidence?
He's influenced by the media a little bit, huh?
Or, he's just not truthful. He's just trying to separate himself. I don't like the us versus them mentality. It's all one thing. We all want the Tigers to win. And by coming out and just being honest, it's way better. I've kind of decided that I don't like these PC answers, and I do believe that managers are going that way because there's guys like me on Twitter at 20, with big time followings that kind of will maybe make a little bit of sarcastic remarks, like I did with Justin Verlander in his recent news, which we'll talk about. But you have to handle it. I can take it. You have to handle it.
Take the heat, right? Get out of the kitchen if you can't take the heat.
Yeah.
And as a big league manager, you got to be able to take the heat every single day.
Bottom line, I said it in a long way, he's just not that personable after 2 years. Like, I don't think I could walk up to him without him maybe looking at me cross-eyed. That's kind of how I feel right now. Whereas
He's better than all of us. He's better than all the media, better than all the fans watching the Tigers. And
I don't
is it
like
really
that.
true? No, it's not ever true. Okay, nobody's better than anybody, really. Okay, that's how you should sum it up. Nobody is. And you were saying that's a turnoff for you, huh? Now we know what a turnoff is for you. It's watching Brad Ausmus give a press conference because he's so PC.
Exactly.
And there's so many guys like that now where, like you said, Stan Van Gundy is the top guy when it comes to giving honest answers. He is that guy there for the Pistons, but not to focus now entirely on them. Let's move on and focus our attention back on the Tigers here. And Bruce Rondon, we kind of already talked about it. You talked about it again after Dave Hogg released his thoughts and extensive thoughts about how he thinks he still adds up as a closer. He still has that material, the type of stuff that you need, the slider at 89, the 102-mile-per-hour fastball. So he can bring it, can be dominant. It's about him having that work ethic now. So he thinks that if he brings the energy, has more of that work ethic, next year he can be a closer again, Doc. I don't think they should ever trust him again in that role because they've already had him as a closer and waiting since at least spring training of 2013. And it's been too long of a leash.
It's time.
But what can you get for him? He's got no value now, I think. He has talent in that arm, but they look at him, he's overweight, he's lazy. Who wants him when you're overweight and lazy? Not many teams want an overweight and lazy guy, right?
Yeah, I was thinking, how do you present him to, general manager? Well, he throws 100 miles an hour.
Yeah,
that's about
the best thing that you can say about him, right?
So, Al, you sent him home with his work ethic. Has he corrected that? Oh, yeah, he's great. I see him in the gym. He's right now calling me. He's all into it. And now you got to kind of upsell and, put lipstick on the pig.
And I hope they would get something out of him now in spring training, before spring training starts. I hope he just regains that momentum, that liveliness that maybe he never had, but maybe gains it for the first time then, because he needs that to be effective and sharp in 2016. So that's the question. Will he be able to regain or just gain that form for the first time? My doubts are there. They are very, very readily existent. I think they are for you, and they are there for Dave Hogg as well. So moving on now let's look at JD Martinez here. His pursuit of 40 home runs is nearing the end. With 5 games to go for the Tigers, not likely.
Nope.
So what are the chances for you, Doc? I mean, they're way below 50% at this point.
Yep, no, they have 25%. I don't think, that he's going to do it. But, he still may make it on a hot streak, but near the end of the season, it's not too likely. I think that the players are, not to say they have I-75 eyes, but, it's winding down. I know they're giving full effort. They're still winning games. Good first game versus Texas, but I don't see it happening.
I say he gets 2 more. He's in Tejas. How about that ballpark? Mm-hmm. In Arlington, that's a big-time home run hitter's ballpark. It really is. And then the south side, U.S. Cellular Field. The Cell is a big-time sand lot or sandbox for hitters. So hitters love it there. I say he gets 2 more home runs. 1 in Tejas, 1 in Chicago as well.
Is he at 48 now or is he at 47?
He's 37. 37, yep.
Mm-hmm.
So he's 3 away. I don't think he gets it.
37.
But maybe he'll get close. I mean, 39 still is very impressive. And as you were saying before, Ausmus kind of figured out that this was a guy that, hey, I can implement into the middle of the order. Maybe he did it a little bit late this year, obviously, and slotting Vmart ahead of him for all that time when Vmart should have been hitting behind JD, but that's another story. And then Alavila. Alavila, really, he was a guy that found this guy, pegged it, that JD was this guy that could hit for big power and be this all-around player, and now he's really grown into that all-around player in right field. And now for the Tigers, it's about adding that left fielder as well in the offseason. Can they find that guy on the open market? What do you think about that, Doc?
Yeah, I'm confident that Alavila is putting together staff that's going to help rebuild his team and find guys like JD Martinez. I don't have no question in that. It's just, knowing that in the past they put together that bullpen, they put together the starting rotation, they've let guys go. In all honesty, when you look at it, it was probably wrong to prematurely give Justin Verlander that big contract. There might have been some other moves like, why did you let Doug Fister go? That Alavila was part of. Now that he's the guy, it's not like we brought in an outsider that's totally fresh. This guy was sitting right next to Dave Dombrowski when these moves were made. So why was it that Doug Fister was let go? That's a good question. That's a solid thing. So
Alavila probably had a say in that, and also in letting go of Max Scherzer.
It was a bad move. It was a bad move. Those are bad moves. So now you have to go into it with a little bit of reservation and hoping that the decision. We can't just say that because Al made it, it's a good move. No, we're going to question it. We're going to look at it because there have been moves that he's made that were positive, and moves that he's made that working with Dave that haven't gone so well.
How about Max Scherzer? What do you think about him now and letting him go after a horrible second half? He had 7 innings of no-hit ball, though. Already threw a no-hitter this year. Had another one going in his start right after that. But since that second start where he had no-hit material, he's been horrible. Horrible in the second half of the season for the Nats. And they've been miserable as a franchise themselves. And they're fighting now Papelbon, Bryce Harper going at it. 2 fiery competitors. And Scherzer is too, but he hasn't been effective in the second half. And I think the Tigers, you can say now, Dave D and Alavila made the right decision in letting him walk.
And you can say that. That's a question that is super tough to look at and answer because most pitchers hit their prime 27, 28, and they're looking for 5 to 8 year contracts well in the range of $180 to $220 million. It's tough because you always know that the contracts at the end are going to be terrible. They're going to be horrible for you. But in the short term, if the Tigers wanted to make that push this year, they should have maybe done it. But, you look at what happened, you bring in David Price to replace him. It's not bad, but now you have to let him go because the season tanked because you were unable to fix the bullpen. So you can't pay everybody. You can't, if the budget says you have a certain amount of money, then you have to follow it. But the window was now. The time was now. So in that sense, if, it's easy to spend other people's money, I would have brought Scherzer back. But I'm not mad that they didn't.
I'm not disappointed.
No.
Not at this point, after seeing what he's done, and he's getting older and older. For 7 years, did he get 7 years? He got, I think, 7 years. That's a lot of money. Whatever he got, it was a long term and past 5 years. And too many years and too much money for my liking.
But they structured it in a way where he's getting $15 million after
it's
his career.
backloaded.
It's backloaded. So you could have did some things if that's how you can make contracts. But the idea is this: you had a window from 2012 to 2015 where you had a solid team, and because of one glaring weakness that was not addressed, the bullpen, I think the window's closed and you got to start looking at a whole new wave. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be like next year they'll be in the World Series. It's going to take maybe another 3 to 5 years. I believe that series versus Boston closed the window on this run.
They set them back that much, huh? Can't they extend the window now by making the right moves and necessary moves to upgrade the rotation and pen in the offseason?
Extend the window.
I believe that.
Yeah, you can extend the window to get to the playoffs, but I'm not
but no
down
World
for that.
Series in their future, in the immediate future.
No.
You're really closing the window that quickly on that.
I closed it. Oh, once Brad Ausmus was hired, I
now
was
being
livid.
retained.
And being retained. Oh, you're going to have to basically surround Brad Ausmus with top-line people at every position in order for him to be good. Yeah, me and you can manage if you give me, top-of-the-line pitchers. I'm going to throw this guy out here and this guy out here, and I'd get the best bench coach, and here we go. And I could give PC answers all day, too.
And Lamont's probably not the best bench coach to have either. I mean, These guys, they should have revamped the entire staff. They could have. They had the opportunity and missed out on the boat, and now they're stuck with Brad Ausmus. But it's his third, I'm going to say, like I said before, it's his final year in Motown next year. I'm guaranteeing that. He's not going to last past next year because they're not going to have enough success to where they're going to say, we have to keep Brad Ausmus for a 4th year.
Okay, that's a good way to stamp it with that. I like the fact that I don't like the fact that we feel stuck at this point in time. So, all right.
And now, you know what? It's about making moves, though. Johnny Cueto. Is it him or bust for the Tigers in the offseason? What do you think, Doc?
No, I think they can get other guys that can come in here because you got guys here that are already here. You're looking to improve I really would like them to focus on the bullpen. So maybe on the next podcast we can see about who's out there that we can bring in out there, free agent relievers out there. We can look that up for the next podcast for sure.
Really quick, the playoff picture, okay? I know you wanted to get into something else to close out today's podcast, episode number 10 here. But, the Cardinals are one of those teams who are based on building from within. They let guys walk. As we were saying, the Tigers have really had to sign guys to keep up with the Joneses. They've let some guys walk, and they haven't been able to build from within to really revamp their starting pitching completely or very efficiently. Other teams, Cardinals, who have had success for so long now, do it. And that's why they're in the playoff picture once again. And right now, they're the number 1 seed in the National League. And they'll play the winner as of right now of the wild card game, which this will stay the same. The Cubs and Pirates in the NL wild card.
Now you can correct me because I always love the Oakley champagne celebrations. KC, the Cubs, the Mets, and Toronto. I've seen them dance. Anybody else clinch?
You know what? The Cardinals have. St. Louis has. Yeah, St. Louis has big time.
That's the only
But after that, I know Houston hasn't. The Yankees have not yet. But the Jays, the Royals, the Rangers haven't. And let's look at the American League side then of things first, okay? Houston and the Yankees in the American League wild card playoff game right now. I gotta take. This is sad, but true for me. I gotta take the Yankees.
You have to.
I gotta because you know what? I just think they're more veteran laden. They are more of a veteran core. They're going to get it done. But then you could play devil's advocate and say, well, you can throw Dallas Keuchel or Scott Kazmir out there for the Astros and beat the Yankees head to head because they don't have a true ace, the Yanks, right now. Unless you think Tanaka is that or Pineda. And Pineda maybe. I think Tanaka is more of that. But will he be ready to go? Because I think he has to for the Yankees, almost playing devil's advocate here, to win. But then you look at the strength of the pen for the Yankees, and they're hitting more veteran-laden. That's why I got to take the Yanks, honestly. Because you know why, really, for more than just that? It's the Astros sliding in the second half. I think more of that is the reason for why I'm taking the Yanks in that. And then you would have right now winning the American League West then. The Rangers, who have come out of nowhere to catapult the Stros. They're playing the KC Royals in the first round. You know what? I'm going to take the Rangers in upset fashion. The Royals have the better record, are I think tied for the best record in the American League with the Jays. But I think the Royals get upset. I like the Rangers pitching and rotation better than the Royals. So the Jays would play the winner then of that matchup between the Stros and the Yanks in the American League wildcard game. And that would be the Yanks then for both of us. So I've got the Jays. I thought they would play in the ALCS. So I've got the Jays in that advancing to play the Rangers. We'll talk about maybe the ALCS then next week again. We've already talked about it before, but that would be the potential ALCS matchup for me. Okay. And you've already talked about it before yourself. We can dive now into the National League for now and look at these playoff matchups. And the NL wildcard playoff game will stay the same because the Cardinals have that division wrapped up. So it's the Cubs and Pirates. Ooh. I like the Buccos a lot to finally get over the edge. They've been in the wildcard playoff game for 2 years in a row. Cubs are young. Joe Maddon's great, but Clint Hurdle's great too. And you got McCutchen. You got Garrett Cole, Burnett, the veterans, Liriano, and that good bullpen. I think the best bullpen ERA in Major League Baseball are right up there. For me, because of all that, I'm taking the Buccos. How about you, Doc?
I agree with you. I agree 100%. I'm looking forward to these playoffs. I can't wait to see what happens, but I could be surprised if I wouldn't be surprised either way in that wild card matchup. I'm so thrilled that the team like the Cubs is coming back. Joe Madden, a team like that who hasn't won, revitalizing the fan base. It's going to be a fun time, but I'm glad that the wild card was instilled. It adds extra level of excitement and a little bit more hope for teams to get into the playoffs.
So I think Jim Leyland's former team in the Pittsburgh Pirates advances to play their divisional foes in Tony La Russa's former club, the St. Louis Cardinals, right? I think the Cardinals advance to play the winner then of the Dodgers and Mets as of right now on that other side of the bracket in the NLDS. And the Mets, I think the strength of their pitching gets it done, and the Mets then upset the Dodgers just as the Rangers upset the Royals. How about that take? Me having the Mets over the Dodgers in the first round. Dodgers, a mighty team, high payroll and all that.
Well, there's something going on with the Mets that's a little bit special.
Isn't it?
Once they brought on Cespedes.
Our boy Cespedes, yeah. They've taken off, huh?
Yeah, they've done well. I like that. I like the Mets. And the Dodgers always seem to underachieve for some reason. They got a big payroll. They make the playoffs. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty and making the key plays at the right time and getting over that hump, they don't do it.
And Kershaw and Greinke don't get it done in the playoffs. So for me, I have right now a rematch of the 06 NLCS between the Cards and the Mets. That's my take right there. And then in the American League, to recap, I have the Jays and the Rangers. How about that matchup? An enticing one, a surprising one. And I think even more surprising than my NLCS match between the Mets and the Cards there. So,
interesting stuff.
Yeah,
now,
some tasty matchups there, Doc.
Now, speaking of some news, couple things came out in the news recently on the TMZ side of things, the entertaining side. So did you see that brawl between Papelbon and Bryce Harper? I mean, talk about boiling over frustrations. Papelbon might be on the market now, looking to be moved because of his display. I mean, there's a nice still. I mean, it's not nice, but there's a still of him choking the hell out of Bryce Harper. And I'm like, dang, I can understand when there's a lot of testosterone, but that was pretty nasty. That was a heated argument.
Is that a microcosm of their season?
Terrible. It's unbelievable that was a team that a lot of people kind of early on thought would get to the World Series and do some damage. You bring in a Max Scherzer, you got Zimmerman, you got Bryce Harper, arguably one of the finest young talent out there, and you don't get it done? Whoo! And now you're fighting. Papelbon, that guy is a hothead, and he's going to be moved on for sure.
He'll be gone because they're keeping Bryce Harper, best player in the NL, best player in the bigs maybe, at 22 years old. Numbers similar to the greatest players of all time, Ted Williams. All those guys, best of the best, better than Mike Trout this year as well. Remember that.
Well, I think Jose Iglesias pushing McCann didn't look as vicious because Iglesias is a tiny little squirt.
Yeah.
He gave him a full push.
And there was no choking here, right?
Yeah, full-on choking gets Papelbon. Yeah, so that's the line. If you
edge.
Yeah, if you choke your teammate, there's a strong scenario, strong likelihood you're going to be off the team.
In those WWE-esque brawls, I think Papelbon and Bryce Harper have the edge over McCann and Iglesias, to say the least.
Yeah.
And you know what? The Nats have underperformed, underachieved, and it's because of that. That rotation hasn't been as strong as thought, and their lineup's really not that good. So the Nats, Matt Williams there, I think he's out of a job, just like Ausmus should have been, Doc.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, some news that just came out recently. ESPN did an article. They were profiling the Cubs and the Ricketts, the owners of the Cubs. Mm-hmm. And Kate Upton was holding court because she's close friends with the Rickett family. And so she kind of was holding court, telling stories. And she kind of let it slip that after a bad game, Verlander told her, was like, you know what, I'm so mad. I got to handle this. Let's get blackout drunk. I'm like, oh, man, you can't tell that kind of stuff. It got out because a reporter was featuring the family, but he reported it. And then it's in an article.
Well, hey, that's not being PC, huh?
That's not being PC.
And you like that, letting it rip. But that shouldn't have been included in that story. That looks bad now on JV, big time.
Is it bad to, they're human. And sometimes when there's high-pressure situations, you have a couple cocktails. But the key phrase, blackout drunk.
That looks bad, man. It's a bad image, bad portrayal of JV. And he's your ace, your leader of the Tigers. Not looking the best, but I don't think he's ever been a great leader. Not to now reflect on that. But maybe not the best clubhouse leader. Miguel Cabrera is not either. V-Mart is, but now he's on the downside of his career. They need a proven leader now, huh? I think they do among the players inside that clubhouse. So I don't think JV is the answer for that. But anyways, to sum up, to reflect back on your question here, my comment is that it's not a thing that you include in any kind of piece about a player, about a team, and it looks bad. It really is a negative portrayal of JV. But hey, there's guys that do it, they get drunk. But to that extent, that's the key phrase, like you said, getting blackout drunk. And that's why...
Oh my God!
Oh my God is right. That's why it looks bad.
JV drinks to the point of getting blackout drunk? Why? When you got Kate Upton and you're, that's your girlfriend, why are you getting blackout drunk?
No reason to be disappointed or upset, right? Even if you have a bad performance, you have her to go home to at night. So yeah, there shouldn't be any kind of disappointment factor level to where he has to go get blackout drunk. But maybe Kate Upton does too, and she probably didn't include that, right? She didn't include that she gets blackout drunk.
Why?
I bet if JV is, Kate Upton might have done so in the past as well.
Yeah, I don't. So. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a tough situation, and
that's an interesting side note, though, or sidebar to bring up here, Doc.
Again, blackout drunk, Justin Verlander, $28 million. That's the stories that's coming out with this team.
Well, just don't do anything stupid where you get in trouble with the law then, or get into a car accident and injure yourself or injure somebody else. So make sure Kate's all right then to drive you home, right? Or get an Uber. Ubers are great in Royal Oak. I love them.
Oh, man, that's another great podcast. Thanks to Dave Hogg. He came on. He shared some information. And actually, we had some solid takes in line with what most people are thinking regarding the Tigers, Ausmus, and Bruce Rondon. It was always a fun time, man. I doing this podcast has kept my interest in baseball, whereas if we weren't doing it, I probably would have checked out a long time ago.
I bet you would have. It's always a pleasure co-hosting with you, and this has been episode number 10 of Tigers Talk with Chirco & Co. We'll talk to you again next week, and every single Wednesday. Each edition drops every single Wednesday here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, and also on DetroitSportsNation.com. We'll talk to you again soon. Have a good one.